She was mocked at the coffee shop for her simple barista uniform, her quiet demeanor, and the way she meticulously crafted each drink with military precision. "Hey, can you even handle a real man's order?" sneered one customer in tactical gear. "Let her try," laughed another with a SEAL tattoo peeking from his sleeve. "Worst case, we get free entertainment." Even Commander James Harrison, the decorated Navy SEAL known for leading the impossible Karachi extraction, glanced her way and muttered, "I don't take coffee advice from people who've never seen real pressure." The Lighthouse Coffee House stood like a weathered beacon on the edge of Coronado Beach, just 2 miles from the Naval Special Warfare Command. Its wooden beams and salt-worn exterior contrasted sharply with the sleek military facilities nearby. Inside, the aroma of freshly ground beans mingled with ocean air that drifted through open windows. This wasn't just any coffee shop. It was an unofficial gathering place for America's elite warriors, where the atmosphere hummed with quiet intensity and unspoken brotherhood. The morning crowd at Lighthouse had a particular rhythm: naval officers with polished shoes, SEAL instructors with calloused hands, and intelligence personnel with observant eyes filled the reclaimed wood tables. They spoke in measured tones about training rotations, equipment upgrades, and the occasional carefully worded mission reference. Their coffee orders were as regimented as their lives: black, double espresso, precise temperatures, delivered with expectations of perfection. This particular Wednesday brought a special crowd. Team 7 had returned from a classified deployment, and the Lighthouse buzzed with reunion energy. Commander James Harrison, 38, sat at the center table, his weathered face creased from years of sun and stress, his presence commanding respect without effort. Around him gathered his elite unit, their bodies relaxed but eyes alert, their laughter carrying the relief of men who had again defied death together. The outsider, Morgan Kelly, 29, moved behind the counter with quiet efficiency, her slender frame barely disturbing the air as she navigated the espresso machines. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her standard issue green apron hung loose over a plain white t-shirt and jeans. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance, which perhaps made her precision all the more noticeable. She steamed milk with the focus of a bomb technician and poured latte art with surgeon-like steadiness. The whispers started almost immediately after she'd begun her shift 3 days earlier. "Who hired the robot?" Lieutenant Parker Wilson muttered, his imposing frame taking up 2 chairs as he stretched his tattooed arms. "Girl hasn't said more than 5 words since I walked in." "Probably intimidated," replied Ryan Cooper, a barrel-chested SEAL with a recently healed scar above his eyebrow. "We tend to have that effect on civilians." "Coffee's decent though," admitted Sam Reeves, the team's communication specialist, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who'd inhaled too much desert sand. Morgan continued working, seemingly oblivious to their comments, her movements economical and precise. When she delivered their orders, each one perfect, despite the complex modifications, she simply nodded and returned to her station without engaging in the friendly banter the SEALs were accustomed to from other staff. The mockery grew sharper as the morning progressed, fueled by the team's post-mission adrenaline and the particular brand of brotherhood that often manifested as cutting humor. "Hey Parker, I think she's practicing for Robot Barista Championships," Cooper called out, just loud enough for Morgan to hear. "First prize is a personality upgrade." Parker chuckled, spinning his empty cup on the table. "Maybe she's undercover. SIA's really lowered their standards." "Nah," Harrison said, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. "Intelligence requires situational awareness. She hasn't looked up from that counter once." Morgan's eyes flickered briefly in their direction, the only indication she'd heard them, but her expression remained unreadable, her hands continuing their dance across the espresso machine. The bell above the door chimed as Marshall Briggs entered, the coffee shop's owner. His gray beard and flannel shirt gave him the appearance of a retired fisherman rather than a successful businessman. He nodded respectfully toward Harrison's table. "Commander, good to have you boys back. First rounds on the house." Harrison stood, shaking Briggs' hand firmly. "Appreciate it, Marsh, though your new hire might need some customer service training." Not exactly the welcoming committee. Briggs' eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. "Morgan, she's just focused. Give her time." "Time won't fix boring," Cooper muttered, earning laughs from his teammates. Briggs simply smiled, patting Harrison on the shoulder before making his way behind the counter. He spoke quietly to Morgan, who nodded once before continuing her work. The SEALs returned to their conversations, occasionally glancing toward the counter with mild curiosity. The real tension began when Admiral Lawrence Phillips arrived. At 62, Phillips was a living legend. In Naval Special Warfare, former SEAL, now overseeing multiple teams from his administrative position. His presence immediately straightened backs and quieted conversations. "Harrison," Phillips greeted, pulling up a chair. "Brief me on Karachi, informal version." Harrison nodded, leaning forward as his team created a privacy buffer around them. "Sir, we extracted the asset as planned, but intelligence was outdated. Building had twice the hostiles we expected, and structural integrity was compromised." Cooper took a hit. He nodded toward the scar above Cooper's eyebrow, but maintained position while we secured the package. 18 hostiles neutralized. No civilian casualties. Phillips nodded, his face giving away nothing. "Medical reports said you carried Cooper 3 miles to extraction with a dislocated shoulder. That accurate?" Harrison shrugged, discomfort flashing across his face. "Team effort, sir." "Like hell it was," Cooper interjected. "He fireman carried me through active fire while directing the team. Should have been a Navy Cross right there." Harrison shook his head dismissively. Anyone would have done the same. Phillips studied Harrison for a moment before changing the subject. "I need coffee before we continue." "Black, hot enough to mean it." "I'll get it, sir," Parker offered, standing. "Sit down, son." "I can order my own coffee," Phillips said with good humor, approaching the counter where Morgan stood. The entire shop seemed to hold its breath. Admiral Phillips was known for his exacting standards in everything from tactical planning to how his coffee was prepared. "Black coffee, hot as you can make it," Phillips stated, his tone clipped but not impolite. Morgan nodded, reaching for a specific bean without hesitation. The SEALs watched with mild interest as she ground the beans and prepared a pour-over method rather than using the batch brew most customers received. Phillips raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she worked methodically, checking the water temperature twice before beginning the pour. Her circular motion was hypnotically perfect, her timing exact. When she finished, she placed the cup before him with a simple, "Sir." Phillips took a sip, his expression unchanging. Then he looked directly at Morgan for the first time. "Colombian, high altitude, proper temperature. You know your coffee, young lady." Morgan nodded once, "Yes, sir." Something in her tone made Phillips pause, but he simply nodded in return and brought his coffee back to the table. "Probably the most words she strung together all day," Cooper joked, but Phillips silenced him with a look. The meeting continued, with Harrison providing more details about the Karachi operation while the Admiral occasionally sipped his coffee. Morgan continued working, serving other customers who filtered in and out, maintaining her quiet efficiency. The climax of the morning arrived when a group of Bud AS trainees, basic underwater demolition SEAL candidates, entered the shop, their exhaustion evident in their movements, but their eyes bright with determination. They ordered protein-heavy breakfast items and multiple espresso shots, their voices carrying the forced confidence of men trying to prove themselves. One trainee, noticing the decorated SEALs in the corner, straightened his posture and nudged his companions. They quieted immediately, casting respectful glances toward Harrison's table. "Those the guys from Team 7? One whispered too loudly. "Shut up, Martinez," another hissed. "Show some respect." Harrison nodded acknowledgement. To the trainees who looked like they might pass out from the recognition, Admiral Phillips chuckled. "Remember when you were that green, Harrison?" "Like it was yesterday, sir," Harrison replied, though it had been nearly 15 years. The trainees collected their orders from Morgan, mumbling thanks without really looking at her. As they turned to find seats, one trainee tripped slightly, sending his triple espresso flying directly toward Morgan. What happened next silenced the entire coffee shop. Morgan's hand shot out with supernatural speed, catching the flying cup mid-air without spilling a drop. The movement was so fluid, so precisely calculated, that it appeared almost casual, except that such reflexes were anything but normal. The trainee froze, mouth open in shock. "How did you?" Morgan simply handed the cup back to him, her expression unchanged. "Careful. It's hot." For a brief moment, the SEALs at Harrison's table stopped talking, their trained eyes registering what they'd just witnessed. That movement wasn't luck. It was the product of thousands of hours of training. The kind of training they recognized intimately. Cooper recovered first, laughing it off. "Guess robot barista has some programming upgrades." The moment passed, conversations resumed, and Morgan returned to her methodical work. But Harrison continued watching her, his eyes narrowed slightly in assessment. The mockery took a sharper turn when Lisa Blackwood entered the coffee shop. As the only female SEAL instructor at the training command, her presence commanded immediate respect. Her athletic frame and confident stride drew eyes from around the room, though the SEALs at Harrison's table merely nodded in professional acknowledgement. "Blackwood," Harrison greeted. "Thought you were torturing trainees in the surf today." Lisa grinned, pulling up a chair. "Evolution got pushed to afternoon. Mind if I join the war stories?" "Always welcome," Harrison replied, making space at the table. Lisa glanced toward the counter. "New barista?" "Yeah," Cooper snorted. "The personality-free model. Makes good coffee, though." Lisa frowned slightly, but said nothing as she approached the counter to order. Morgan looked up, and something imperceptible passed between the two women. A moment of recognition, perhaps, though neither's expression changed. "Americano, triple shot," Lisa ordered. "And whatever pastry isn't loaded with sugar." Morgan nodded, preparing the drink with her usual precision. As she handed it over, Lisa studied her intently. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but Morgan answered anyway. 3 days, Lisa took her order and returned to the table, where conversation had turned to the upcoming training rotation. As the morning wore on, the mockery from Harrison's table grew more pointed, encouraged by Cooper's increasingly loud comments. "Seriously, though," he said, draining his third coffee, "who hires someone with the personality of a brick wall to work customer service? I've met classified documents with more expression." Parker laughed, adding, "Maybe she's practicing for a mime career on the side." Even Harrison joined in, though his comments carried less malice than curiosity. Probably just intimidated. "Not everyone's comfortable around our kind." Lisa Blackwood frowned. "Our kind? You mean arrogant coffee drinkers who judge service workers?" "Ouch," Harrison replied, though his smile remained. "Just saying there's something off about her. Too controlled for a civilian. Ever consider?" "She might just be good at her job," Lisa challenged. Cooper snorted. Good at her job would include basic human interaction. "Watch this." Before anyone could stop him, Cooper approached the counter, leaning against it with exaggerated casualness. The shop had emptied somewhat, making his voice carry clearly. "So Robot Girl got a name, or just a serial number?" Morgan looked up, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. "Morgan, she speaks," Cooper announced to the room, theatrical. In his surprise, "Tell me, Morgan, what's a girl like you doing in a SEAL hangout? Don't you find us intimidating?" Something flickered in Morgan's eyes, not fear, but something harder to define. No. Cooper's smile faltered slightly. No. Most civilians get nervous around guys who kill for a living. Cooper, Harrison warned from the table. Stand. Down. But Cooper was on a roll now, his post-mission adrenaline seeking an outlet. Just making conversation, boss. Trying to help her develop those people skills. Morgan continued wiping down the counter, her movements deliberate. Cooper leaned closer. Hey, I'm talking to you. Basic courtesy would be to look at me. Morgan paused, then raised her eyes to meet his. The intensity in her gaze made Cooper blink first. I'm working, she said simply. Yeah, and part of your work is customer service, Cooper pressed. So service me with some conversation. What's your story? Failed actress? College dropout? What brings someone to the thrilling career of pouring coffee for their betters? The coffee shop had gone completely silent. Harrison half rose from his chair, ready to intervene, but Admiral Phillips placed a restraining hand on his arm, watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. Morgan set down her cloth, her movements calm but something dangerous entering her posture. She straightened to her full height, still well below Cooper's, but somehow the movement made her seem larger. Is there something else you needed? Sir? She asked, her voice quiet but carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Cooper's smile widened, sensing he'd finally gotten a reaction. There she is, some fire after all. I was beginning to think you were his words cut off abruptly as Morgan reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. The movement caused her collar to shift slightly, revealing a small, distinctive pin on the inside of her shirt collar, partially hidden, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. A Trident pin. The symbol earned only by those who had completed BDS training and qualified as Navy SEALs. Cooper's face drained of color. He took an involuntary step backward, eyes fixed on the pin before Morgan's collar fell back into place, concealing it once more. That's not possible, he whispered, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. You're not, you can't be, Morgan's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held Cooper's with an intensity that silenced him completely. Your coffee's getting cold, sir, she said quietly. Anything else? Cooper returned to the table in a daze, his face ashen. Harrison immediately leaned forward. What happened? What did she say to you? Cooper shook his head, struggling to find words. She has a... Admiral Phillips stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. The movement drew everyone's attention as he approached the counter, his posture formal. His eyes fixed on Morgan with new understanding. Lieutenant Commander Morgan Kelly, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I thought you looked familiar. The coffee shop erupted in shocked whispers. Harrison's team froze, staring between the Admiral and the unassuming barista in disbelief. Morgan straightened to attention, though she remained behind the counter. Admiral Phillips. Phillips shook his head slowly, something like admiration. Crossing his features. Stand easy, Commander. I believe an explanation is in order for all of us. Morgan's gaze swept across the room, taking in the shocked faces of the SEALs who had been mocking her all morning. Her posture remained composed, but for the first time, a hint of a smile touched her lips. Yes, sir, I believe it is. Harrison approached the counter slowly, his tactical mind reassessing everything he thought he knew about the quiet barista. You're a SEAL, but there are no female SEALs in active service. Morgan's eyes met his, unflinching. Not anymore, sir. Marshal Briggs emerged from the back room, standing beside Morgan with a proud smile. I think it's time for a proper introduction, Commander Kelly. The coffee shop had transformed into a tableau of shocked faces and suspended breaths. The BUDS trainees in the corner looked like they might faint from the revelation. Lisa Blackwood's expression shifted from surprise to something fiercer, pride, perhaps, or vindication. Morgan removed her apron slowly, revealing a simple white t-shirt underneath. With deliberate movements, she reached into her pocket and withdrew the Trident pin, attaching it properly to her shirt where everyone could see it. The gold anchor, trident, eagle, and pistol gleamed under the coffee shop lights, the symbol that separated the elite from the merely exceptional. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Morgan Kelly," she said, her voice stronger now, carrying the unmistakable authority of command. "Former Team 4, Special Activities Division. And yes, I make excellent coffee." Harrison found his voice first. "There's never been a woman who passed Buddy S. It's not possible." Admiral Phillips cleared his throat. "There's a lot about Commander Kelly's service that remains classified, Harrison. Suffice to say, exceptions were made for exceptional people." Cooper had regained some of his color, though his usual confidence remained shaken. "But why are you working in a coffee shop? Why here?" Morgan looked at him steadily. "Everyone needs something after service, Cooper. This is mine." The revelation hung in the air, the implications rippling through the room. The elite warriors, who had spent the morning mocking her, now stood speechless, reassessing everything they thought they knew about the quiet barista who had endured their comments without reaction. Marshal Briggs broke the tension, clapping his hands once. "All right, show's over. Commander Kelly still has a job to do, and I imagine you all have somewhere to be." Slowly, conversation resumed, though now tinged with a different energy. Respect, curiosity, and more than a little embarrassment from those who had been most vocal in their mockery. Harrison approached Morgan directly, his posture formal. "Commander, I owe you an apology. My team's behavior was unacceptable." Morgan considered him for a moment. "Your team follows your lead, Commander Harrison. Worth remembering." The criticism was subtle but clear, delivered with the precision of someone used to commanding respect. Harrison nodded, accepting it without defense. "I'd like to hear your story sometime, if you're willing to share it." Morgan's expression softened slightly, perhaps, but not today. As Harrison returned to his team, Lisa Blackwood approached the counter, a broad smile breaking across her face. "I knew I recognized you from somewhere," she said, extending her hand. "Your file crossed my desk once. Heavily redacted, but what remained was impressive." Morgan shook her hand firmly. "Instructor Blackwood, your reputation precedes you as well. Those trainees in the corner look like they're about to worship at your feet." Lisa nodded toward the BDS candidates, who were indeed staring at Morgan with undisguised awe. Morgan glanced their way, her expression softening. "They have a long road ahead, made longer by idiots like Cooper who reinforce the idea that they're gods among men," Lisa said quietly. "Everyone needs heroes," Morgan replied, "and villains. Both serve a purpose in training." Lisa studied her thoughtfully. "Is that why you're here? Serving some greater purpose?" Morgan's smile was enigmatic. "I'm just making coffee, instructor." But they both knew it was more than that. As Morgan returned to her work, the atmosphere in the Lighthouse Coffee House had fundamentally changed. The SEALs at Harrison's table spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward the counter with new respect. The trainees straightened whenever Morgan looked their way, as though she might evaluate their worthiness on the spot. And Morgan herself continued as she had before, quiet, efficient, precise, but now the qualities that had earned her mockery were recognized for what they truly were, the hallmarks of America's elite warriors. The only difference was the Trident pin now visible on her shirt, and perhaps the slight smile that occasionally touched her lips when she caught Cooper watching her with lingering disbelief. By noon, word had spread beyond the coffee shop. Naval officers and enlisted personnel began finding reasons to visit the lighthouse, curious to see the legendary female SEAL who had somehow remained a secret until now. Morgan handled the attention with the same quiet efficiency she applied to everything, neither encouraging nor discouraging the interest. Admiral Phillips was the last to leave, approaching the counter one final time. "You know this changes things," he said quietly. "Your cover, such as it was, is blown." Morgan nodded once. "I know, sir." "Was that your intention?" She met his eyes steadily. "No, sir. But I'm not sorry it happened." Philip studied her. For a moment longer. "You never were one for hiding, Kelly, despite your talents for it. We'll talk soon." As he left, the bell above the door chiming his departure, Morgan returned to cleaning the espresso machine, her movements as precise as ever. But something had shifted in her demeanor, a weight lifted, perhaps, or a decision made. The Lighthouse Coffee House had welcomed many warriors through its doors, but none quite like Morgan Kelly. And as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, the quiet barista continued her work, the Trident on her shirt catching. The light, a silent reminder that appearances rarely tell the complete story, and that true strength often comes in unexpected forms. The coffee shop buzzed with speculation as word spread throughout the Naval Special Warfare community. By afternoon, Marshal Briggs had to station himself at the door, politely turning away curious onlookers who had no intention of ordering. "Coffee. This is still a business, gentlemen," he reminded them firmly. "Not a museum exhibit." Morgan continued working with the same quiet efficiency, the only difference being the Trident pin now visible on her collar. She acknowledged the respectful nods from new customers with brief smiles, but otherwise maintained her focus on crafting perfect drinks. The transformation in how people addressed her was immediate and telling, from dismissive glances to deferential ma'ams and commanders. When her shift ended at 4 p.m., she hung up her apron and nodded to Briggs. "See you tomorrow, Marsh." "They'll be back in force, you know," he warned, concern evident in his weathered face. "Once this hits the seal grapevine, you'll never have peace again." Morgan's smile was slight but genuine. "I never wanted peace, Marsh, just purpose." She exited through the back door, avoiding the small cluster of Navy personnel who had gathered out front. Her modest blue Jeep was parked in the employee section, dusty from beach sand and looking nothing like what people might expect a decorated special operator to drive. As she reached for the door handle, a voice called out, "Commander Kelly." Morgan turned to find Lisa Blackwood leaning against the building, arms crossed. The SEAL instructor pushed herself upright, approaching with measured steps. "Thought you might want an escort." "The Barracudas are circling." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "I've handled worse, no doubt. But even SEALs work in teams." Lisa grinned, a flash of white teeth against her sun-darkened skin. "Besides, I have questions, lots of them." Morgan considered her for a moment, then unlocked the passenger door. "Get in." As they drove away from the lighthouse, the Pacific Ocean glimmering on their right, Lisa studied Morgan's profile. "You know, there are rumors about a woman who completed Buddhist unofficially, training alongside male candidates, but never formally. Acknowledged. That you?" Morgan kept her eyes on the road. "Some rumors have elements of truth. And some classified programs never officially existed," Lisa finished, understanding immediately. "So why reveal yourself now? You could have kept the pin hidden, endured Cooper's idiocy without exposing your background." Morgan was quiet for several moments, the only sound the rumble of tires on pavement and the ocean breeze through half-open windows. Finally she said, "Some burdens get heavier the longer you carry them alone." The road wound along the coastline, eventually turning inland toward a modest neighborhood of small bungalows. Morgan pulled into the driveway of a pale blue house with white trim. Nothing about it suggested its occupant was extraordinary. No flags, no military insignia, just a well-tended garden of native drought-resistant plants. "Come in," Morgan offered. "If you want the story, it's not a short one." Inside, the house was minimal but comfortable. Military precision was evident in the organization. Books arranged by subject and height, kitchen implements stored with functional efficiency, a single wall displaying shadow-boxed medals, and a framed photograph of a group of sailors, their Faces blurred through digital manipulation except for Morgan's. Lisa pointed to the photo. Team 4? What's left of it that isn't redacted, Morgan confirmed, filling a kettle and placing it on the stove. Tea? Or something stronger? Tea's fine. I'm still on duty technically. As Morgan prepared 2 mugs, Lisa noted the lack of personal touches that normally filled a home. No family photos, few decorations, nothing that revealed the woman behind the warrior. The house felt like a temporary station rather than a permanent residence. How long have you been out? Lisa asked, accepting the steaming mug. 3 years, 4 months, 17 days, Morgan answered without hesitation. Medically retired after Libya. Lisa nodded slowly. The Libya operation had been classified, but rumors persisted of a high-value extraction gone catastrophically wrong. That explains the limp. I noticed it's worse when you're tired. Morgan's smile was wry. Not much escapes your attention. Kind of my job. Lisa sipped her tea, waiting for Morgan to continue. Morgan sat across from her, both hands wrapped around her mug. My story isn't that different from yours, I imagine. Wanted to serve. Wanted the hardest challenge. Found barriers, broke through them. Except I trained SEALs, Lisa corrected. I never became one. There's a universe of difference, Morgan shrugged. Different paths to the same mountain. So how did it happen? Lisa pressed. How does a woman end up with a Trident when the program officially excludes females? The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves. Morgan seemed to be calculating how much to reveal, weighing classified restrictions against personal truth. 2011, she finally began. I was Navy intelligence, assigned as EL Team 4 as an analyst. Languages were my specialty, Arabic, Farsi, Pashto. I deployed with the team to Afghanistan, worked alongside them, but stayed on base during operations. She paused, memories clearly playing behind her eyes. Until the Kandahar incident. Our convoy was hit by an ID, 3 team members critically wounded. I was the only one left standing who could communicate with local forces. Ended up covering fire while coordinating a medical evacuation in 2 languages. Lisa nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. You proved yourself in combat. The team commander saw something in me. Said I thought like them, moved like them. When we returned to base, he had me join their PT sessions unofficially. Said if I could keep up, he'd see about expanding my role. Morgan stood, moving to a small wooden chest on a shelf. From it, she withdrew a worn notebook and handed it to Lisa. My training log. Every workout, every evolution, every standard. Lisa flipped through pages of meticulous records, run times, swim distances, strength benchmarks. The progression was remarkable, from strong to exceptional, from exceptional to elite. You weren't just keeping up, Lisa said quietly. You were excelling. Morgan nodded once. The team started including me in more aspects of training. Still unofficial, still under the radar. Then a joint operation came up, something requiring deep cultural knowledge and language skills, plus direct action capability. The team commander made his case to higher-ups. And they approved it? Lisa asked, incredulous. Not exactly. Morgan's smile was humorless. They created a special program. Highly classified. A test case for women in special operations roles, before it became more widely implemented. I wasn't the only candidate, just the only one who completed the full training pipeline. She paused, sipping her tea. Butt-ass wasn't official. I trained alongside a regular class, but was evaluated separately. Hell Week was conducted with modified standards, but I insisted on completing the same evolutions as the men. The instructors were split, some determined to prove women couldn't handle it, others committed to fair evaluation. And you made it through, Lisa said, her voice colored with admiration. By the skin of my teeth. Morgan rolled up her Sleeve revealing a long scar running from elbow to wrist. Fractured my arm during rock portage. Splinted it myself and kept going. The medical officer wanted to pull me. My team commander intervened. Lisa shook her head in disbelief. They kept it completely quiet, all these years. Plausible deniability. Morgan explained. If the experiment failed, no one would know it had been attempted. If it succeeded, they could claim a groundbreaking initiative when politically expedient. But they never went public, even after you earned the Trident. Morgan's expression hardened slightly. Political winds shifted. New administration. New priorities. The program was shelved, classified at the highest levels. I continued serving with Team 4, but officially I remained listed as Special Technical Support Personnel. My operations are redacted from all public records. That's why Cooper and Harrison didn't recognize you, Lisa realized. Your existence as a SEAL was kept from even other teams. Compartmentalized information. Only those with direct need to know were briefed. Morgan set down her mug. My team knew, obviously. Command structure above them. A few others. Like Admiral Phillips, Lisa added. Morgan nodded. He was instrumental in creating the program. Took significant career risks to support it. Lisa returned to the training log, flipping to later pages. The entries became more cryptic. Locations designated by code names. Outcomes marked with simple success or failure notations. The writing grew shakier in some entries, suggesting they were recorded under difficult conditions or during recovery from injury. 8 years of active service, Lisa calculated. Multiple deployments. Bronze Star with Valor device if I'm reading between the lines correctly. Among others, Morgan confirmed without elaboration. And then Libya happened. Lisa closed the log gently. That's where the entries stop. Morgan's face remained impassive, but something haunted flickered in her eyes. Libya happened. The weight of unspoken trauma hung between them. Lisa didn't press for details, recognizing the boundaries of classified operations and personal. Pain, so why a coffee shop? She asked instead. With your skills, you could be doing anything. Private security, government contracting, intelligence work. Morgan rose, moving to the window that faced the ocean, visible as a distant blue line. After medical retirement, I tried those paths. Security consulting for 3 months. Too corporate. Too political. Contractor work for 6 months. Too mercenary. Considered CIA, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Couldn't go back to the shadows, Lisa guessed. Something like that. Morgan turned back to face her. I traveled for a while. Himalayan trekking. Deep sea diving in Thailand. Wilderness survival courses in Patagonia. Looking for something that would give me the same focus, the same purpose as the teams. And you found it making lattes? Lisa couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Morgan's smile was unexpected and genuine. I found it at the Lighthouse. Marshal Briggs was Force Recon, Vietnam era. Recognized something in me when I stopped for coffee one day. Offered me a job that came with simplicity and routine, but also connection to the community I'd left behind. She returned to her seat, her posture relaxing slightly. There's a certain peace in creating something perfect, even something as simple as coffee. The precision, the attention to detail, the service element, it's not so different from mission planning. Just fewer people die if I miscalculate the timing. Lisa laughed, surprised by the dark humor. So you've been hiding in plain sight, serving coffee to the very community that doesn't know you exist. Not hiding, Morgan corrected. Observing. Learning to live as a civilian again. Finding my footing in a world where I'm not defined by a classified designation. The conversation paused as Morgan's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, her expression shifting subtly. Admiral Phillips. Requesting a meeting tomorrow. Damage control? Lisa guessed. Probably. My revelation at the Lighthouse complicates things for the program, even if it's defunct. Morgan typed a brief reply and set the phone aside. The existence of a female SEAL raises questions the Navy might not want to answer publicly. Like why they haven't officially opened Bud S to women despite proven success, Lisa suggested. Morgan shrugged. Politics, tradition, fear of change. The usual reasons institutions resist progress. As evening approached, the two women moved to Morgan's small back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The conversation shifted to training techniques, tactical preferences, and the changing landscape of special operations, professional topics that allowed them to connect as colleagues rather than as curiosities in each other's lives. The trainees who saw you today, Lisa said, they'll never forget it. Especially the women in support roles who dream of doing what you did. Morgan frowned slightly. I'm not interested in being anyone's inspiration story. Too late, Lisa replied bluntly. The moment you pinned that trident to your shirt in front of Cooper and his team, you became a symbol. Might as well embrace it. Before Morgan could respond, her phone buzzed again. A text from Marshal Briggs. Cooper and Harrison at the shop asking about you. Media caught wind too. Fox News called for comment. What's our position? Morgan showed the message to Lisa, who whistled low. That escalated quickly. I need to call Marsh, Morgan said, rising from her chair. Feel free to stay, but this might take a while. Lisa nodded, understanding the dismissal. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Kelly, I think the revelation was overdue. Your achievement deserves recognition, even if it comes with complications. Morgan's expression remained guarded. We'll see if you still think that when the circus arrives in full force. After Lisa departed, Morgan paced her living room. Phone pressed to her ear as she spoke with Briggs. His normally calm voice carried notes of concern. It's a madhouse, Morgan. Harrison's team has practically taken over the corner table, intercepting anyone who comes in asking about you. Cooper seems to have appointed himself your unofficial press secretary, claiming he always knew something was special about you. Despite the tension, Morgan laughed. Convenient revision of history. Fox wants an exclusive. CNN called too. The Navy POW office has been ringing non-stop, demanding I direct all inquiries to them. Briggs sighed heavily. I'm too old for this nonsense. I'm sorry, Marsh. I didn't intend to drag you into a media storm. Don't apologize for who you are, Commander, he said firmly. I've been dealing with entitled sailors since before you were born. I can handle a few reporters. Just tell me what you want me to say. Morgan considered carefully. Tell them I'm unavailable for comment. Direct Navy inquiries to Admiral Phillips. Everyone else gets nothing. And tomorrow? Will you be coming in for your shift? The question gave her pause. It would be easier to disappear, to use her considerable skills to vanish until the story died down. But running had never been her way. I'll be there, she confirmed. 0600 as scheduled. Figured as much, Briggs replied, satisfaction evident in his voice. I'll have your apron ready. After ending the call, Morgan moved through her evening routine with military precision, a light workout focusing on rehabilitation exercises. For her injured leg, a simple meal high in protein, equipment check of her diving gear for the weekend's planned ocean excursion. Normal activities that anchored her to civilian life while honoring her military discipline. Later, as she methodically cleaned her service weapon, a habit she maintained despite no longer needing to carry it daily, her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from a number she hadn't seen in months. The text was brief. Sanctuary. Compromised. Assets relocating. Contingency Charlie. Morgan stared at the message, its implications clear. Her former teammates from the classified program were activating emergency protocols, moving to predetermined safe locations. Her public exposure had ripple effects beyond her personal situation. It potentially compromised others who had worked alongside her. In operations that officially never happened, she sent a single response: acknowledged. Secure on station. The reply came seconds later: watch your six, Phantom. The use of her operational call sign, a name she hadn't heard in years, sent a chill through her. Phantom, they'd called her, for her ability to move undetected through hostile environments, to blend into any background until the moment she chose to be seen. Morgan moved to a painting on her wall, a seascape in muted blues and grays. Behind, it was a small safe, its biometric lock responding to her fingerprint. Inside lay her go bag, passport, alternate identification, emergency cash in multiple currencies, a satellite phone, and a thumb drive with encrypted data. She checked each item methodically, then returned them to the safe. She wasn't running, but she wasn't foolish either. Her years in the shadows had taught her to prepare for every contingency. As she closed the safe and replaced the painting, her mind returned to the events at the lighthouse. Perhaps Lisa was right. Perhaps it had been time to step from the shadows to claim her accomplishment openly. Or perhaps she had jeopardized years of careful work for a moment of personal satisfaction. Either way, there was no returning to anonymity now. The quiet barista with the military precision had been revealed as something far more significant. The only question was what happened next. Morning came with the gray light of coastal fog. Morgan rose at 0430 as always, completed her PT regimen. Despite the twinge in her leg, and prepared for the day with careful attention to detail. She chose standard civilian clothes, jeans, a navy blue t-shirt, running shoes, but pinned the Trident to her collar without hesitation. No more hiding. When she arrived at the lighthouse at 0545, the parking lot was already filling, not with the usual morning customers, but with news vans, their satellite dishes poised like periscopes. Marshal Briggs met her at the back entrance, his expression a mixture of amusement and concern. Quite the welcome committee, he noted, nodding toward the front of the building where reporters clustered like seagulls around a fishing boat. Admiral Phillips called. Said to tell you he's ordered a security detail. They'll be here within the hour. Morgan shook her head. Not necessary. This will die down. Briggs raised an eyebrow. You really believe that? First confirmed female. Navy SEAL in history goes public while working in a coffee shop frequented by the very men who thought women couldn't cut it. This story has everything. Military controversy, gender politics, inspirational overcoming the odds angle. They'll run it into the ground. Then we give them nothing to work with, Morgan replied, hanging up her jacket and donning her green apron. I make coffee. I say no comment. Eventually they'll get bored and leave, Briggs snorted. If you believe that, you've forgotten more about human nature than I ever knew. As Morgan began her opening procedures, grinding beans, checking equipment, preparing the day's first batch brew, Briggs continued updating her on developments. Harrison came by last night after closing. Wanted to apologize formally for his team's behavior. Seemed genuinely disturbed by how they treated you. Morgan nodded without looking up from the espresso machine she was calibrating. He should. Leader set the tone. Also, that instructor Blackwood called. Said to tell you the floodgates are opening, whatever that means. This made Morgan pause. Her exact words? Yeah. Significant? Potentially. Morgan returned to her work, expression thoughtful. It means my story leaked beyond local circles. National now. Briggs whistled low. Well, that explains the CNN truck. You ready for this? Morgan's smile was small but determined. I survived Bud S. Marsh. I can survive a news cycle. At precisely 0600, Briggs unlocked the front door. The reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, questions overlapping in a cacophony of demand. He blocked the entrance, his Vietnam era glare stopping them cold. "This is a coffee shop, not a press conference," he announced. "Anyone who wants to come in, order, and leave a reasonable tip is welcome. Anyone looking to harass my staff can clear out now." His authority, honed by decades of military service and reinforced by his imposing presence, created a momentary pause. Then a young reporter called out, "We just want to confirm, is it true that Commander Morgan Kelly, the first female Navy SEAL, works here?" Briggs crossed his arms. "My staff's military backgrounds are their own business. Now, are you ordering coffee or not?" The standoff might have continued, but it was broken by the arrival of a group of Navy personnel, Harrison at their head, Cooper and several other SEALs from Team 7 following behind. They moved through the press contingent with practiced efficiency, creating a path to the door. "Official business," Harrison stated flatly to a reporter who tried to intercept him. "Naval Special Warfare Command personnel only." Once inside, Harrison approached the counter where Morgan worked with her usual focus, seemingly oblivious to the chaos outside. He stood at parade rest, formal and uncomfortable. "Commander Kelly, we've come to offer our formal apologies for yesterday's conduct." Morgan glanced up briefly. "Apology noted, Commander Harrison. What can I get you?" Harrison blinked, clearly thrown by her businesslike response. "That's it? No repercussions? No official complaint? Would it make you feel better if I reported?" "You?" She raised an eyebrow. "Would self-flagellation improve your morning?" Cooper stepped forward, his usual cockiness replaced by genuine contrition. "We were out of line, ma'am. Way out of line. If there's anything we can do to make it—" "Right, you can order coffee," Morgan interrupted calmly. "And then either leave or sit quietly. I have work to do." The SEALs exchanged glances, unused to such dismissal of their attempts at honorable amends. In their world, transgressions were acknowledged, addressed, and resolved through clear protocols. Morgan's refusal to engage with their apology ritual left them unbalanced. "Commander," Harrison tried again, "your service record, what we've been cleared to know of it, is exemplary. The way you were treated in this establishment yesterday was nothing compared to Bud S." Morgan finished for him, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Or haven't you heard? I'm quite good at enduring discomfort." This unexpected humor broke the tension. Cooper laughed, a short bark of surprise, and even Harrison's rigid posture relaxed slightly. "Fair point, Commander." He gestured to his team. "Orders, gentlemen." As the SEALs placed their complex coffee requests, each one delivered with the precision of a mission parameter, Morgan fulfilled them with efficient movements, her focus absolute. The normalcy of the interaction seemed to settle something in both parties, an unspoken acknowledgement that while yesterday had revealed her extraordinary background, today she was simply a highly competent barista who deserved professional respect. Outside, the media continued to gather, their cameras occasionally capturing glimpses through the windows. Inside, Harrison's team arranged themselves at tables near the entrance, creating an effective buffer between the press and the counter where Morgan worked. "Perimeter security," Cooper explained when Briggs raised an eyebrow at their positioning. "Least we can do." As the morning progressed, other military personnel arrived, some from Naval Special Warfare, others from various branches stationed nearby. Each one approached Morgan with a mixture of curiosity and respect, ordering coffee and often leaving with a thoughtful expression, as though reconciling the quiet barista with the elite warrior she had been revealed to be. At 0900, Admiral Phillips arrived, accompanied by a stern-faced naval public affairs officer. The admiral bypassed the press entirely, his authority parting them like a ship's bow through water. Inside, he nodded to Harrison's team and approached Morgan directly. "Commander Kelly, a word if you please." Morgan wiped her hands on a towel and gestured to Briggs, who immediately stepped in to cover the counter. She followed Phillips to a back office, the PO officer trailing behind with a concerned expression. Once the door closed, Phillips introduced the officer. Commander Jackson, Navy Public Affairs. He's here to discuss the official response to your revelation. Jackson consulted his tablet. Commander Kelly, your service record presents a unique challenge from a public relations perspective. Much of your career remains classified, yet your identity as potentially the first female Navy SEAL has significant public interest implications. Morgan remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The Secretary of the Navy has authorized the following statement, Jackson read. The Navy acknowledges the service of Commander Morgan Kelly in various special operations capacities. While specific details of her service record remain classified, we can confirm that Commander Kelly completed advanced special operations training and served with distinction in multiple theaters. Her retirement with full honors followed injuries sustained in the line of duty. He looked up. You'll note there is no specific confirmation or denial regarding SEAL qualification. Plausible deniability, Morgan observed. Still playing. Both sides. Phillips sighed. Politics, Kelly. The same reason your program remained classified. There are still significant voices opposed to women in combat roles, let alone special operations. Yet here we are, she replied evenly. With me wearing a trident in public and the media capturing every moment. Hard to maintain deniability. Now, Jackson looked uncomfortable. We'd prefer if you would refrain from displaying the trident pin while this matter is resolved at higher levels. Morgan's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. I earned it, Commander Jackson. The same way every SEAL earns it. Through blood, sweat, and sheer determination. I won't hide it to make politicians comfortable. Phillips held up a hand before Jackson could respond. No one is asking you to deny your service, Kelly, but there are larger implications here. Other women who participated in the program, other operations that could be compromised. This gave Morgan pause. The others were notified? Contingency protocols activated last night, Phillips confirmed. All secure. She nodded once, considering. And the current female candidates? The ones working towards special operations roles through official channels now. Phillips and Jackson exchanged glances. That's part of why we're here, Phillips said carefully. Your revelation has accelerated certain timelines. The Secretary of Defense is preparing an announcement regarding the formal opening of all special operations training pipelines to qualified female candidates, effective immediately. Morgan's expression remained neutral, but her posture straightened almost imperceptibly. All pipelines, including Bud S? All of them, Phillips confirmed. Your existence makes continued restriction untenable. If one woman has already completed the training successfully, the argument against allowing others to try loses its foundation. For the first time since the conversation began, Morgan smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. So some good comes of this circus after all. Your perspective is refreshing as always, Commander, Phillips said dryly. Now about the media situation. The discussion continued, covering talking points, security concerns, and the protection of still classified information. Throughout, Morgan remained calm and professional, accepting necessary restrictions, while firmly maintaining her right to acknowledge her service and qualification. As the meeting concluded, Phillips held back while Jackson departed to make calls. Alone with Morgan, the Admiral's formal demeanor softened slightly. You know, Kelly, when we selected you for the program, there were those who said it would end in disaster. That you'd fail, or worse, that you'd succeed but never be accepted by the community. Morgan waited, sensing he had more to say. I told them they underestimated you. That you'd not only meet the standard but exceed it, and that one day your achievement would change the entire special operations landscape. He gestured toward the front of the shop, where reporters still gathered. Seems that day has arrived, though not quite as any of us expected. Not exactly how I planned to spend my retirement, sir, Morgan admitted. Phillips laughed softly. Few things in life go according to plan, Commander. The question is how we adapt to changing conditions. Flexibility, adaptability, and creative problem-solving, Morgan recited. SEAL Ethos 101. Indeed. Phillips extended his hand. Whatever comes next, know that your service has made a difference. Not just in the operations you conducted, but in the doors you've opened for those who follow. Morgan shook his hand firmly. Thank you, sir. Though I suspect the hardest part is still ahead, for them and for me. As she returned to the main floor of the coffee shop, Morgan found the atmosphere had shifted again. Lisa Blackwood had arrived with 3 young women in Navy PT gear, junior officers based on their bearing, all clearly in peak physical condition. They stood at the counter, watching Morgan approach with expressions of barely contained awe. Lisa made the introductions. Commander Kelly, meet Lieutenants Rivera, Washington, and Chun. They're currently in the pre-screening program for special operations eligibility. Morgan nodded to each woman, noting their perfect posture and evaluating gazes. They were sizing her up, looking for confirmation that the impossible was, in fact, possible. Ma'am, Lieutenant Rivera began, her voice steady despite her evident excitement. We just wanted to say thank you for showing it can be done. Morgan studied them thoughtfully. These women stood at the beginning of a path she had walked alone, facing challenges she had confronted without precedent or guidance. They would have their own mountains to climb, their own barriers to break, but unlike her, they would do so in the light, with official sanction and at least the theoretical support of the institution they served. It can be done, she confirmed, her voice quiet but carrying absolute conviction. But understand what that means. No shortcuts, no special treatment, no excuses. The standard is the standard for a reason. The 3 lieutenants nodded solemnly, absorbing her words like a mission briefing. The men will doubt you, Morgan continued. Some will undermine you, others will support you. Ignore both groups and focus on the work. Your performance is the only argument that matters. Lieutenant Chun, the smallest of the 3, but with a coiled intensity in her compact frame, asked, Any specific advice, ma'am? Morgan considered the question carefully. Learn to be comfortable with discomfort. Find humor in suffering. Never give anyone a legitimate reason to question your place. And know that every failure, every success, will be magnified because of your gender. She paused, then added, But most importantly, remember why you're doing it. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but because something inside you demands nothing less than your absolute best in service to something greater than yourself. The women absorbed her words in respectful silence. Then Lieutenant Washington asked the question Morgan had been expecting. Will you help us prepare, Commander? Train with us? Share what you know? Before Morgan could respond, the front door burst open, and a new wave of reporters surged in, having apparently received some new information that energized their pursuit. Camera flashes erupted, questions shouted over one another in a chaotic jumble. Commander Kelly, is it true you're the first female SEAL? Were you part of a secret program? How many combat missions did you complete? What do you say to those who believe women can't meet the physical standards? Harrison's team moved instantly to intercept them, creating a human barrier between the press and Morgan. Cooper's voice rose above the din. Back off! This is a private establishment. In the chaos, Morgan made her decision. She removed her apron, folded it precisely, and placed it on the counter. Then she stepped forward, past the protective line of SEALs, and raised her hand for silence. Remarkably, the clamor subsided. Cameras continued to record, but the shouted questions ceased as all attention focused on the woman with the Trident pin on her collar. My name is Commander Morgan Kelly, United States Navy, retired. I served my country for 15 years in various capacities, including special operations. The details of my service remain largely classified, and I will not discuss specific operations or missions." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled reporters. "I will say this. Every sailor, soldier, airman, and Marine serves according to their abilities and the needs of their nation. I was privileged to serve alongside the finest warriors our country produces, and I carried the same load, met the same standards, and faced the same risks as my teammates." A reporter called out, "But did you complete Bodeas? Are you officially a Navy SEAL?" Morgan touched the Trident pin on her collar. "I earned this through the same training pipeline as every other special operator who wears it. The fact that my training occurred under classified circumstances doesn't diminish the achievement or the qualification. What's your message to other women who want to follow in your footsteps?" another reporter asked. Morgan turned slightly, looking directly at Lieutenants Rivera, Washington, and Chen, who stood watching with rapt attention. "My message is simple. The standard is the standard. Meet it. Exceed it. And remember that being first doesn't matter. Being worthy does." With that, she ended the impromptu press conference, turning back to the counter where Marshal Briggs waited with her apron. "Nice speech," he said quietly as she retied the green fabric around her waist. "Short, but effective." Morgan shrugged. "I'd rather make coffee than headlines, Marsh." "Too late for that, Commander," he replied, nodding toward the windows where photographers continued to capture every moment. "I think you're in for both." As she returned to work, Morgan caught sight of Lisa Blackwood giving her a subtle thumbs up. The three lieutenants watched her with expressions of determined inspiration. Before departing with renewed purpose in their steps, Harrison approached the counter one final time. "That was well handled, Commander." "Just doing my job, Commander," she replied evenly. "Both jobs, apparently." He smiled slightly. "If you ever decide you're tired of making lattes, Naval Special Warfare could use someone with your experience to help develop the women's training program." Admiral Phillips mentioned the possibility. Morgan considered this as she crafted a perfect espresso. "I'll think about it." As Harrison left with his team, Cooper paused at the door, turning back to offer Morgan a respectful nod that contained more genuine admiration than any words could have conveyed. She acknowledged it with a slight nod of her own, a silent exchange between warriors who had moved past yesterday's misunderstandings to a place of professional respect. The Lighthouse Coffee House continued its day, adapting to the new reality where its head barista was also a living legend. Customers came and went, some drawn by curiosity, others by their regular coffee needs. Through it all, Morgan maintained her quiet efficiency, her movements precise, her focus absolute. She had spent years in the shadows, serving her country in ways few would ever know. Now she served in the light, creating perfect coffees instead of executing perfect operations. Both roles required discipline, attention to detail, and dedication to craft. Both allowed her to exercise the skills that had made her exceptional. And as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the lighthouse, highlighting the Trident pin that caught occasional flashes of gold against her collar, Morgan Kelly continued her work, no longer hidden, no longer denied, but finally acknowledged, for she had spent years in the shadows, serving her country in ways few would ever know. Now she served in the light, creating perfect coffees instead of executing perfect operations. Both roles required discipline, attention to detail, and dedication to craft. Both allowed her to exercise the skills that had made her exceptional. And as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the lighthouse, highlighting the Trident pin that caught occasional flashes of gold against her collar, Morgan Kelly continued her work, no longer hidden, no longer denied, but finally acknowledged for exactly who she was. The media storm intensified over the following days. News vans maintained their vigil outside the lighthouse, though most respected Marshal Briggs' firm boundaries about conduct inside the shop. National morning shows led with Morgan's story. Military blogs analyzed the implications, And social media erupted with hashtags. Hashtag Navy SEAL barista, hashtag Trident and TAMPED coffee, and hashtag Morgan Kelly effect. By the third day, Briggs had hired temporary security, 2 retired Marines who stood at the door checking IDs and turning away anyone who didn't have legitimate business at the coffee shop. Regular customers found themselves navigating the gauntlet of reporters asking for their perspective on Commander Kelly. Morgan herself remained focused on her work, declining interview requests and limiting her public statements to the brief comments she had made that first morning. Her daily routine remained unchanged, arriving precisely at 0545, working her shift with meticulous care, and departing through the back entrance to avoid the media circus. But beneath the surface calm, significant changes were unfolding. Admiral Phillips called daily with updates on the Defense Department's accelerated timeline for integrating women into special operations roles. The announcement had generated predictable controversy. Conservative commentators decried it as lowering standards, progressive voices celebrated it as overdue progress, and military leaders offered carefully balanced statements about maintaining operational effectiveness while expanding opportunity. On Friday morning, a week after her revelation, Morgan arrived to find an unexpected visitor waiting at the back entrance, a tall, gray-haired woman in civilian clothes whose bearing immediately identified her as military. Morgan recognized her instantly. Admiral Reeves. Admiral Catherine Reeves, the highest-ranking woman in the Navy and Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, smiled warmly. "Commander Kelly, I hope you don't mind the ambush. Seemed easier than fighting through your media admirers at the front." Morgan unlocked the door, gesturing for the Admiral to enter. "Not at all, ma'am. Coffee? Please." Black and strong enough to stand a spoon in it. Inside, before the shop opened, the 2 women sat at a corner table with steaming mugs between them. Admiral Reeves studied Morgan with thoughtful eyes. "You've created quite the situation, Commander." Morgan met her gaze steadily. "Not intentionally, ma'am. Intentions aside, we're dealing with the reality." Reeves sipped her coffee, nodding appreciatively. "Good as advertised. Now to business. The Secretary of Defense has appointed me to lead the integration of women into Special Operations Forces. Given your unique experience, I'd like you to serve as special advisor to the implementation team." Morgan's expression remained neutral, but her grip on her mug tightened slightly. "With respect, Admiral, I'm medically retired. I'm well aware. This would be a civilian consultant position, focusing on training protocols, standards maintenance, and integration strategies." Reeves placed a folder on the table. "Your perspective is invaluable, Commander. You've already walked the path these women will follow." Morgan didn't reach for the folder. "My experience was classified under different parameters than what you're implementing. I'm not sure how relevant it would be. Quite the contrary. The challenges you faced, isolation, skepticism, physical demands designed for male physiologies, will be exactly what these candidates encounter, just without the secrecy." Reeves leaned forward. "They'll need someone who understands both the technical requirements and the psychological burdens. Someone who's been there." Morgan was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally she asked, "What exactly would this role entail?" "Initially, consulting on the revision of training protocols. Later, possibly direct mentorship of candidates and liaison with instructors." Reeves gestured toward the front of the shop, where the first customers were beginning to arrive. "You could maintain your current position if you wish. We'd work around your schedule." The back door opened as Marshal Briggs arrived, stopping short when he saw the Admiral. "Ma'am," he acknowledged with a respectful nod before continuing to his office. Once they were alone again, Morgan opened the folder, scanning its contents quickly. The proposal was comprehensive. A 6-month initial contract, flexible hours, substantial compensation, and clear boundaries around media engagement. I won't be a poster child, Morgan said firmly, looking up from the documents. No press conferences, no interviews, no public appearances. Agreed, Reeves replied without hesitation. Your expertise is what matters, not your publicity value. Morgan closed the folder. I'll consider it, Admiral. That's all I ask. Reeves stood, extending her hand. The women who follow you will face their own challenges, Commander Kelly. But thanks to you, they won't face them alone or in the shadows. After the Admiral departed, Morgan moved through her opening procedures with her usual precision, though her mind was clearly elsewhere. Briggs emerged from his office, eyebrows raised in question. Admiral Reeves doesn't make social calls, he observed. Morgan handed him the folder without comment. He skimmed it, whistling softly. Quite the offer. You taking it? Haven't decided. Morgan calibrated the espresso machine with careful attention. Complications either way. Briggs leaned against the counter. You know, when I offered you this job, I figured you'd stay a few months, get your bearings, then move on to something more fitting your skills. Never expected you to settle in so completely. Morgan looked up, surprised. You thought this was temporary? A warrior like you making lattes for a living? Of course I thought it was temporary. His weathered face creased with understanding. But I get it now. After what you've been through, the simplicity is appealing. No life or death decisions, no classified burdens, just the perfect execution of a straightforward task. Something like that, Morgan admitted. But sooner or later, most warriors feel the call to serve again, Briggs continued. Just in different ways. This might be yours. Before Morgan could respond, the security team opened the front door, and the day's first customers entered, a group of female naval officers who had become regulars since Morgan's revelation. They greeted her with respectful nods, placed their orders, and took seats by the window, their conversation a mixture of operational planning and good-natured gossip. As Morgan crafted their drinks, she found herself studying them with new awareness, noticing the determination in their postures, the focus in their eyes, the subtle signs of women who had already navigated significant barriers in their careers. Women who might, given the opportunity, follow the path she had pioneered. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Lisa Blackwood, accompanied by Lieutenants Rivera, Washington, and Chun, the three women from earlier in the week. They approached the counter with purpose, Rivera carrying a folder similar to the one Admiral Reeves had presented. Commander Kelly, Rivera began formally. We've been authorized to share this with you. She opened the folder to reveal an official Navy document, the implementation plan for the Women in Special Operations, WISO program. Chun pointed to a specific section. Phase 1 begins in 3 weeks, ma'am. 17 female candidates have been approved for the initial assessment and selection process. We're among them. Washington added, the standards haven't changed. Same requirements, same evolutions. Just open to qualified women now. Morgan scanned the document with professional interest, noting the compressed timeline and ambitious goals. Fast implementation. Your revelation accelerated everything, Lisa explained. They couldn't justify delay once your existence became public knowledge. They're calling it the Kelly Protocol, Chun said, a hint of awe in her voice. The training methodology is based on reconstructing your experience, minus the classified elements. Morgan looked up sharply. I never authorized the use of my name. Admiral Phillips insisted, Lisa replied. Said it was about time you received proper recognition. Morgan's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her well might have detected the slight tension in her jaw. She closed the folder and returned it to Rivera. 17 candidates, she noted. How many do you expect to complete the pipeline? The 3 lieutenants exchanged glances before Rivera answered honestly, Unknown, ma'am. We're the first official class. No precedent to reference. These women deserved better. They deserved the benefit of her hard-won knowledge. The guidance she had never received, the support of someone who had already conquered the mountain they were preparing to climb. Her decision crystallized in that moment, though she gave no outward sign of it. Instead, she simply asked, "When do you begin preconditioning?" 0500 Monday, Washington answered promptly. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Morgan nodded once. "I'll be there." The three lieutenants exchanged startled glances. "You mean," Chun began. "I mean I'll be there," Morgan repeated. 0500, ready to work. Their expressions transformed from surprise to determined enthusiasm. Morgan held up a hand before they could respond further. "This isn't special treatment," she clarified firmly. "I won't make it easier for you. If anything, I'll make it harder. My standards will be higher than the instructors, my expectations more demanding. If you're not prepared for that, say so now." Rivera spoke for all of them. "We welcome any training advantage, Commander, no matter how difficult." Morgan studied them for a moment longer, then nodded once. "We start with an assessment of your current capabilities. From there, we build a targeted preparation program focusing on your individual weaknesses. Prepare to be uncomfortable." "Yes, ma'am," they responded in unison, their voices carrying the unmistakable tone of women accustomed to challenges and determined to overcome them. As Morgan returned to the counter, Lisa followed, her expression both surprised and approving. "That was unexpected. What changed your mind?" Morgan gestured subtly toward the television outside, still broadcasting the criticism of the retired instructor. "They have enough working against them without also lacking proper preparation. And Admiral Reeves' offer?" "I'll accept, Morgan." "Confirmed, but on my terms. My focus will be direct candidate support, not administrative consultation. The women doing the work deserve the benefit of my experience, more than the officials designing the program." Lisa smiled broadly. "They'll be getting the real deal, no one better qualified." Morgan's expression remained serious. "They still may not make it. The odds are heavily against them, against any candidate, regardless of gender. But they'll have a fighting chance," Lisa countered, "which is all any of us ever ask for." As the afternoon continued, Morgan worked with her usual methodical focus, but her mind was already mapping out training plans, identifying potential challenges, and strategizing approaches to prepare the women for the ordeal ahead. The skills that had made her an exceptional special operator, analytical thinking, tactical planning, resource optimization, now turned toward a different kind of mission, ensuring that the path she had walked alone would be navigated successfully by others. When her shift ended, she found Admiral Phillips waiting at the back entrance, his government vehicle idling nearby. "Commander Kelly," he greeted her formally. "I understand you've made your decision." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "News, really? Does travel fast?" Phillips smiled slightly. "Lieutenant Rivera sent a message to her commanding officer, who informed Admiral Reeves, who called me directly. The Navy may be large, Commander, but certain circles are quite small." "I'll work with the candidates," Morgan confirmed. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I maintain my current employment. Training sessions work around my schedule at the Lighthouse, not the other way around." She held his gaze steadily. "I control the training methodology without interference from command." "And no media involvement whatsoever," Phillips considered briefly. "Agreed, with one caveat. Standard safety protocols must be maintained." "Number." "Unnecessary risks." "Understood." Morgan reached into her pocket, withdrawing the velvet box Harrison had delivered earlier. "About this, the gold Trident?" Phillips nodded. "Long overdue recognition, Commander. Will you accept the formal presentation?" Morgan opened the box, studying the gleaming insignia, the symbol of everything she had achieved and everything she now represented to the women following her path. "Yes," she decided. "But small ceremony, essential personnel only. and I want the 17 WISO candidates present." Phillips raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" Morgan's expression softened slightly. "So they can see what's possible. So they understand what they're working toward. And so they know that no matter how hard the journey becomes, it can be completed." The Admiral nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Inspiration and motivation in one package. "Efficient as always, Commander Kelly." "Just practical, sir." As Phillips departed, Morgan turned toward her jeep, already mentally reviewing the training she would begin on Monday. The path ahead would be challenging, for her as a mentor, for the candidates as pioneers, for the Navy as an institution. Resistance would be fierce, skepticism persistent, and success far from guaranteed. But as she drove home along the coast, the ocean stretching endlessly beside her, Morgan felt something she hadn't experienced since before her injury in Libya. A sense of purpose beyond herself, a mission worthy of her skills, a chance to ensure that her solitary journey would pave the way for others. The quiet barista with the Trident pin had emerged from the shadows not just to claim her own accomplishment, but to illuminate the path for those who would follow. And in that mission, perhaps the most important of her career, she would apply the same precision, focus, and determination that had carried her through Bud Aez, through countless classified operations, and through each perfectly crafted. Coffee at the Lighthouse. Monday would come soon enough. The real work was just beginning. The pre-dawn darkness shrouded Coronado Beach in silence, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. At 04:45 Monday morning, Morgan Kelly stood at the edge of the water, her posture relaxed yet alert as she surveyed the empty stretch of sand. Her civilian clothes, simple running shorts, and a Navy-issued PT shirt belied the authority she carried, though the Trident pin fastened to her collar gleamed faintly in the distant lights of the naval base. The gold Trident ceremony was scheduled for Friday, but Morgan continued to wear her standard insignia, a deliberate choice that conveyed volumes to those who understood its significance. She had earned the right to wear the symbol of America's elite maritime special operations force. The upgrade to gold was merely formal recognition of what she had already proven. At precisely 0450, headlights appeared in the parking area. 3 vehicles arrived simultaneously, and from them emerged Lieutenants Rivera, Washington, and Chun, accompanied by 14 other women in Navy PT gear. They approached in formation, their movements synchronized without apparent effort, a small demonstration of the unit cohesion they had already developed. Morgan watched them without expression. As they lined up on the beach, standing at attention despite the absence of formal orders, Lieutenant Rivera stepped forward. WISO Candidate Class 1, reporting as ordered, Commander. Morgan nodded once. At ease. The women shifted to parade rest, their eyes fixed on Morgan with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. In the gray light of approaching dawn, their faces showed varying degrees of nervousness, determination, and barely contained excitement. Morgan walked slowly along their line, studying each candidate with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated warriors in the most demanding environments on Earth. She noted their postures, their physical conditioning, the subtle signs of how they carried themselves under observation. Some met her gaze directly. Others focused straight ahead with military discipline. "You know why you're here," she began, her voice calm but carrying clearly above the sound of the surf. "In 8 weeks you'll begin the most physically and mentally demanding training program in the military. Statistically, most of you will not complete it. That's not gender bias, it's simple fact. Approximately 75% of all Bud S candidates ring the bell before graduation, regardless of how qualified they appear at the outset." She paused, letting that reality sink in. "My job is not to coddle you, encourage you, or tell you that you're special because you're women attempting something historically restricted to men. My job is to prepare you for the reality of what's coming, to identify your weaknesses before they become failure points, and to ensure that those of you who proceed to butt a yes do so with every possible advantage. A candidate near the end of the line shifted slightly, drawing Morgan's attention. "Something to add, Lieutenant." "Diaz, ma'am. Camilla Diaz." The woman straightened. "Permission to speak freely." Morgan nodded once. "Some of us have already completed programs nearly as demanding as Bud S, ma'am. I was Army Ranger qualified before transferring to Navy. Lieutenant Okafor was Force Recon. Several others come from EOD backgrounds. We're not starting from zero." Morgan's expression remained neutral. "Noted, Lieutenant Diaz. And you're right, you're not starting from zero. But neither are the men you'll be competing alongside, many of whom come from similar backgrounds." She addressed the entire group again. "Your previous accomplishments got you here. They won't get you through what comes next." She gestured toward the water, wet and sandy, now. Without hesitation, the women ran into the surf, fully submerging themselves before rolling in the sand, a familiar ritual for anyone preparing for Bud AS. They returned to formation, now soaked and covered in gritty particles, water dripping from their uniforms. Morgan didn't smile, but something in her eyes conveyed approval at their immediate compliance. "That was your last free sample. From here on, everything must be earned." She outlined the morning's assessment: a timed 2-mile ocean swim, followed immediately by a 4-mile beach run, then a circuit of strength exercises designed to identify specific weaknesses in upper body, core, and lower body power. The standards she announced were not the Bud S minimums, but the optimal performance metrics of successful candidates. Targets that would place them in the upper percentiles of their classes. "Questions?" Morgan asked. There were none. The women understood what was expected. "Begin," Morgan ordered, starting her stopwatch. "For the next 3 hours," Morgan observed without comment as the 17 women pushed through the grueling assessment. Their performances varied. Some excelled in the water but struggled with the upper body components. Others showed exceptional endurance but lacked explosive power. What united them was their refusal to quit, despite obvious pain and fatigue. When the final candidate completed the circuit, Morgan gathered them in a semicircle, their breathing still heavy, sand caked to their wet uniforms. "Adequate," she pronounced, which from her was high praise indeed. "Rivera, Washington, Chun, record everyone's metrics. We'll establish baseline performance profiles and develop individualized training plans by Wednesday." Lieutenant Rivera nodded, pulling a waterproof notebook from her cargo pocket. "Yes, ma'am." Morgan checked her watch. "You all have duty assignments beginning at 0900. Clean up, hydrate, and report as scheduled. We reconvene here Wednesday, same time." As the women gathered their gear, Morgan approached Lieutenant Diaz, who had shown particularly strong performance in several categories. "Your Ranger training shows," Morgan noted. "Good foundation." Diaz straightened. "Thank you, ma'am. But I know Bud S is different. The water component alone is why we'll focus heavily on your swimming efficiency." Morgan finished for her. "Your stroke technique wastes energy. We'll correct that." Diaz nodded, accepting the critique without defensiveness. "Any additional training you recommend before Wednesday, Commander?" Morgan considered the question. 2,000-meter swim focusing on form rather than speed. Video yourself if possible. Study the mechanics. "Will do, ma'am." Diaz hesitated, then added, "If I may say so, Commander, having you guide us through this process is an honor. Many of us joined the Navy because we heard rumors about you years ago." Morgan's expression revealed nothing, but she nodded once in acknowledgement, before moving on to speak with other candidates. As the group dispersed to their vehicles, Lisa Blackwood appeared, jogging down from the base access road. She reached Morgan as the last candidates departed. "How'd they do?" she asked without preamble. "Better than expected," Morgan replied. "Diaz and Okafor are standouts. Shun has extraordinary mental toughness despite physical limitations. Rivera shows natural leadership. Washington might be the most well-rounded. Lisa smiled. Detailed assessment for adequate, Morgan shrugged. First impressions. The scuttlebutt around the base is already buzzing. Word spread that you're personally training the WISO candidates. Lisa fell into step beside Morgan as they walked toward the parking area. Several male Bud S instructors have expressed interest in observing your sessions. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Genuine interest or looking for validation of their skepticism? Bit of both, probably, Lisa admitted. Commander Harrison asked specifically if you'd consider allowing him to observe occasionally. Says it would help him design the integration protocols more effectively. Morgan considered this as they reached her jeep. Limited observation. No interference with the training methodology. I'll relay that. Lisa leaned against the vehicle. So coffee shop at 1100 as usual? Of course. Morgan checked her watch. Still have a regular job to do. As Morgan drove toward the lighthouse, she reflected on the morning's assessment. The women had performed well, better than she had anticipated in several areas. Their determination was evident, their physical preparation impressive. But Budez would demand more than they could currently give. The challenge before her was significant. How to prepare them not just physically, but mentally and emotionally for the ordeal ahead. How to forge in them the unbreakable resilience that had carried her through her own training. The capacity to endure beyond normal human limits, to function effectively under extreme duress, to maintain focus when every fiber of their being screamed for relief. It couldn't be taught through conventional methods. It had to be built. Through carefully structured exposure to increasing discomfort, through mental conditioning that rewired their response to pain and exhaustion, through scenarios that forced them to discover capacities they didn't know they possessed. By the time Morgan arrived at the lighthouse, she had mentally outlined the training progression for the next 8 weeks. Marshal Briggs greeted her with a knowing smile as she entered through the back door. "Successful morning?" he asked, noting her damp hair and the lingering sand on her running shoes. "Productive," she replied, hanging up her jacket and donning her green apron. "You know," Briggs observed casually, "when I hired you, I thought I was getting a barista who happened to be a retired SEAL. Turns out I got a SEAL who happens to make excellent coffee between training the next generation of special operators." Morgan's mouth curved in a slight smile. "Versatility is a core skill, Marsh." The morning rush at the lighthouse had changed subtly since Morgan's revelation. Regular customers still came for their usual orders, but they now treated her with a different kind of respect, not the deference owed to her rank, but the genuine admiration reserved for those who had broken barriers. The mockery that had once filled the shop had been replaced by thoughtful conversation and occasional questions about her new role with the WISO program. Harrison's team continued to frequent the shop, though. Cooper had noticeably adjusted his demeanor from entitled arrogance to professional courtesy. The transformation wasn't lost on Morgan, who accepted it without comment. Around noon, Admiral Phillips arrived with Commander Jackson from Public Affairs, both in civilian clothes to avoid drawing attention. They took seats at a corner table, waiting until Morgan's break to approach her. "The gold Trident ceremony is set for Friday, 1800 hours, Phillips informed her. "Small gathering. As requested, command staff, your WISO candidates, a few selected representatives from the SEAL community." Commander Jackson added, "We've prepared a press release for afterward, focusing on your service record in general terms without classified details. Nothing will be distributed without your approval." Morgan nodded. "The candidates?" "Officially invited as observers," Phillips confirmed. "It's unusual, but given the circumstances, appropriate." "And the backlash?" Morgan asked. "Directly, the interviews claiming I received special treatment." Phillips and Jackson exchanged glances before the Admiral responded. Continuing, unfortunately, several retired operators have been particularly vocal. Without revealing classified information, our options for direct refutation are limited. Morgan absorbed this without visible reaction, though internally she calculated the impact on her candidates. They would face additional scrutiny, additional skepticism, additional pressure to prove themselves, all because some couldn't accept that a woman had succeeded where many men had failed. The best response is results, she said finally. When these women complete Boot S successfully, the criticism becomes irrelevant. Agreed, Phillips nodded, but that's months away at best. In the meantime, we focus on preparation, not public relations, Morgan stated firmly. The women understand what they're facing. Let's not distract them with media concerns. The Admiral accepted her position with a nod, and the conversation turned to logistical details for the ceremony. Throughout, Morgan maintained her characteristic calm, though those who knew her well might have detected the subtle signs of her growing determination to ensure her candidates succeeded, not just for their own accomplishment, but as the most effective answer to those who questioned her own. After Phillips and Jackson departed, Morgan returned to her work, moving through the afternoon with practiced efficiency. At 1600, her shift complete, she changed into fitness gear in the back room and set out for a training run along the coast, part of her own regimen to maintain the conditioning that had once been central to her survival. As she ran, pushing through the lingering pain in her injured leg, Morgan's mind returned to her morning assessment of the WISO candidates. Each woman presented unique challenges, specific weaknesses that needed addressing before Bud S. The training program she was developing would need to be both standardized and individualized, structured enough to build team cohesion, flexible enough to address personal limitations. Her run took her past the Naval Amphibious Base, where Bud S training was conducted.